Hi. So I watched a video from Shofar Mountain about Acts 15 and how Christians use this chapter to say that Gentiles are not under the law. And I did a tiny, small response to it, just a few questions to consider. And so I'm going to read what I wrote for a small response, um, just some points that I brought up. So let me pull that up. So I was distracted while I was watching this video a little bit because I was cooking supper and I had other things going on. But from what I got from the response video here, the response to Acts 15, my response to that, um, I said the point in the video, I think, is that Christians bring this up as a reason the Gentiles don't have to follow the law, and he says that we ignore verse 21. He says that the reason the Gentiles were only given the instructions in verse 28 and 29 is because, as verse 21 says, they were going to hear everything about Moses in the synagogues. He claims that discussing circumcision too quickly would turn off Gentiles from the way, and so they were trying to come to them gently about the law so as not to scare them off or overburden them, and thought they would inform them of the most important laws, which he pointed out to abstain from things pagans do in verse 28 and 29 when he says this is about idol worship. Thus, the first commandment is what they were trying to teach them first. I mean, that doesn't give much credit to the Gentiles that um, talking to them in person and sending a letter only going to address one commandment out of how many you guys say there are? 613, and that's debatable. Gentiles can only take one at a time. We're pretty fragile. So I said my first point. We do not ignore verse 21. We try to understand it in systematic context. We study these things, believe it or not. I know that's hard to believe. Two, learning about Moses in the synagogues does not necessarily mean that they would be taught to keep the law. In fact, I actually don't see any example in the New Testament after that point that they were taught to keep Torah from the synagogue. I see that they were taught some inside some inside the synagogue, but most outside the synagogues and through letters and home churches, and were taught quite the opposite, actually. What I see in this video is a lot of conjecture. That's what I see. It doesn't play out biblically. I just see trying to explain it away. Three, did God ease Israel into the laws once they were given? No, 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 no. I don't think so. Then why, if Gentiles are now supposedly Israel, like the Torah observers say, why are they given a reprieve? They are now Israel, right? We gotta, pat them on the pat them on the back and give them a reprieve. Well, God did not give a reprieve to Israel concerning the Levitical law. We know that. So come on now. And then number four, I said if 28 and 29 was easing them, then why was a Sabbath not one that was necessary here? Because after all, we hear all the time from Torah observers Sabbath is rather easy to keep. How often do we hear how restful and peaceful and what a blessing Sabbath is? But yet, this was not even brought up for things necessary for the Gentiles. Then I said, number five, the guy in the video talks about how James being the leader here, talks about James being the leader here and making this decision to only give Gentiles basically the first commandment by letter and in person both. They can only handle this one by letter and by in person and letter. Okay. And yet James himself tells us that if a person offends on one point of the law, he is guilty of the whole thing. So I would like to know, How do we reconcile the claim in the Acts 15 video here with what James himself says about failing to keep even one point of the law? It doesn't pan out. Number 6, if Gentiles were eventually taught all 613 laws over time in the synagogue, why do we see no New Testament or immediately post-New Testament Gentiles keeping all 613 laws, let alone 15 of them in the entire historical record of early Christianity, including the New Testament? We don't see that. You can say that it's there, but it's not. Number 7, the context, according to the first verse, as he points out, is about having to do circumcision, a Torah law to be saved. But the letter sent out, the actual letter in this passage, does not address the matter of salvation. Okay, so if I was a Gentile receiving this letter, minus being present in verse 1 where the discussion started, if I was just a Gentile in some Gentile church somewhere else and I received this letter, not addressing salvation at all, not even listing the 10 Commandments out, just I'm trying to get in the mindset of what I would have thought being a Gentile and hearing this. And so, if I was sitting in a Gentile congregation when this letter was written, and I'm only going to address parts of it, but if it was being read to me, what would I be thinking as this is being read? Would I be thinking of salvation? I'm just going to read points in it. Since we have heard that some who went out from us have troubled you with words, unsettling your souls, saying, you must be circumcised and keep the law, to whom we gave no such command, for it seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us to lay upon you no greater burden than those necessary things, that you abstain from things offered to idols, from blood, from things strangled, and from sexual immorality. If you keep yourselves from these, you will do well. This letter in no way addresses salvation. It simply tells Gentiles what they need to do. So, yes, in context, we have that there was a discussion about whether a person was saved, saved based on getting circumcised. But the actual letter, if I was sitting there, I would think, okay, I am being told that as a Gentile Christian, I don't have to keep the law. I don't have to be circumcised. That's what it said. And at this point in time, no one has told me to keep Sabbath. Why not? You know? And the other thing is that, are you following that example? Is that how you are addressing Gentiles? It sounds, my experience and a little bit of experience I've had with you folks is you thump us over the head with everything but the first commandment, because we already keep the first commandment. So, yeah, that was my response to that. I'm just kind of, just think things through. Just take a while and think things through, and don't necessarily settle for conjecture. You can make claims, you can make guesswork all the time you want to, but no, just please think things through. I mean, we got our whole lives to study, so let's keep studying and stop just settling for what a person says. If my arguments make sense, good. If they don't, then go study yourself, because we need to know these things. All right. You guys have a good evening. Bye bye.